Hi, folks. Pat and Mike, back at you for another East Coast Hunt Fish Hike Encore episode. This is an excerpt from the episode where Mike and some of his buddies have an unplanned encounter with the swift-moving waters of the Chattahoochee.
Still to this day, I don't know if I've ever been more cold and wet, nor have I ever been so appreciative of a Waffle House All-Star special. So, whether you've been listening along from the beginning or you're new to the pod, if you haven't done so yet, make sure to follow us on Instagram at EC_huntfishhike_pod and subscribe to the podcast to make sure you don't miss any of our outdoor content.
All right, thanks for following along, and remember to get outside. Have some fun out there.
But like a full year after my the rolling of my ankle, my buddy Vic and that same buddy Ian, we were heading up to the river again. We were going to float on the hooch for a little bit, and there was it was a longer canoe that we were going out in. So the first one, I was out in my own little like tiny little kayak, and that was kind of like my introduction into like kayaking and canoeing, and I was hooked right from the jump. But then we were all going out on the same canoe out onto the Chattahoochee River, and we didn't go all the way up to Dahlonega like we did before, which is I was saying before is like it's a little over an hour to get up to Dahlonega. Probably even a little bit more than that, certainly more than that. At the time I was living down in Virginia Highlands, which is all the way down in the city. So looking at, we probably drove the same distance, but because we were starting from down in the city, it took us like the same amount of time, but we didn't get as far up the river. And so we ended up kind of like floating our way down towards like the Roswell-y area, and which is kind of like a suburb that's north of maybe like 45 minutes or so north of like downtown Atlanta.
Yeah.
And so I kind of got the text from Vic the night before or the day before while we were still at school, actually, and he was teaching with me at Marist at the time, wanting to like get the canoe out and head up. Our friend was in town, Ian was in town, and we knew that we wanted to get out on the Chattahoochee, but the thing was that the weather wasn't looking good that day. And so we were trying to kind of like piece together a little bit of a trip, be able to get out on the river, and then it downpoured like that evening, and we were like, oh, okay, well, it looks like we're not going to be able to really get out tonight. That's fine. And then the next day, we kind of like last minute, we're like, you know what, like there's like that big storm the night before, so there's probably not going to be as many people that are going to be like out on the water. It was overcast, but there wasn't like a storm or anything that was on like the forecast. So we were like, you know what, let's do it. Let's head up there. Let's make our way up north of Roswell. We'll float our way down to Roswell. We'll take out like a little bit south of Roswell, and we'll have ourselves like a couple of hours out on the river. It'll be a lot of fun. So we get up there, and it's always good practice to use the bathroom beforehand, whether it's in the woods or in one of like the little porta potties. We were putting in it like this little like almost like state parky type place where they had like bathrooms and stuff. And so like we got there first. Vic and I got there first. We were living together at the time, so we took the same car, and we got there first, and like we're using the bathroom, and as I'm coming out of the bathroom, Vic had gone down to the river, and he was like, Mike, I don't know if this is such a good idea. The Chattahoochee is raging right now, and it's really going quick. He was like, what are you thinking? And he was like, I know that out of the three of us, you're probably the least experienced. So like, do you feel comfortable with it? And of course, I'm thinking like, like we'll ask Ian. We'll see what Ian thinks. Ian pulls up in his car, and he is so jacked up to get out on the river. He was like, this thing is cruising. Like, let's go, guys. This is going to be so much fun. So he kind of convinced us. We were like, all right, let's do it. Let's get out there on the river. And so we took, and the water was moving really quick. And so we got out there, and we spent a little bit of time. We were actually picking some lures out of like the trees and everything for the tackle boxes with people that would kind of like get their lures caught in the trees and then like cut their lines, abandon them. But if you're willing to go and get them, the Chattahoochee has so much overhang that you can fill your tackle box with some of them. So we did a little bit of that. And on this evening, I don't think that we weren't doing like any drinking or anything like that. We were just kind of like heading down there. We didn't have any fishing poles even or anything,
Mm-hmm.
but we were just kind of like making our way up and down. When you're going against the current, like you're putting like every ounce of effort that you can into paddling, and you're barely moving, and
Yeah.
so it's like a workout. And so we're getting towards the part that's kind of like the towards the end of our float, and we're like, you know what, let's turn this thing around, let's make our way downriver in the direction of the current, and let's kind of get ourselves out of here.
Mm-hmm.
So that's exactly what we did. And as we're doing it, I mean, I don't have any experience on like white water, like rafting or anything like that. But this was the fastest moving current that I've ever been in.
Mm-hmm.
And I'd been on the Chattahoochee a couple of times, and we had been in canoes and kayaks and everything. But we were three people in a, like, it was probably like 16 to 18 foot kayak,
Mm-hmm.
but that's three people. That's a lot of weight that's in this kayak. And I remember thinking beforehand, when we were getting into the canoe, and like Ian and Vic like tossed me like the water bag and everything, and I actually kind of like made a joke. I was like, how often do we actually end up needing these water bags, or needing for these water bags to be like tied onto the
Yeah.
canoe? And they were like, oh no, we've never capsized before. Like this canoe has never capsized before. There's no way that we're going to be going under. Well, fast forward a couple of hours, and we're making our way down here, and we ended up getting caught in an undertow over kind of like a shallow rock that was there, this like
Mm-hmm.
massive, like 7 foot long rock that was kind of like shallow water in
Mm-hmm.
this river. And so we kind of like cleared this rock, and then the canoe ended up kind of like turning, and we
Mm-hmm.
ended up getting caught in the undertow that was created with the water current over this very large rock that was close to the surface.
Mm-hmm.
And so we got stuck perpendicular to the river,
Oh no.
and the canoe was kind of like not going anywhere. And so we're paddling to try and get ourselves out of this undertow, and we're not moving. If anything, we're slowly tipping back in towards that undertow and towards
Mm-hmm.
that rock. And sure enough, like even after we had said like Ian and Vic were like, no, this is never like we've never capsized before. We've never made our way into the water before. Like there's no way it's gonna end up happening tonight. Well, there we are. We end up going into the water.
Oh way.
Uh at this point, it's like late February, so it was unseasonably, it was like decently warm at the time,
Mm-hmm.
but we're talking like 50 degrees or so, 50 like 50s ish, and this water is moving, and
Mm-hmm.
we ended up going into we're in the Chattahoochee, like full clothes, like in the Chattahoochee River. And
Wow.
now and now the canoe is capsized, and so we have to get this canoe back upright again. And that part is like a blur to me, because at this point, like I'm trying not to get stuck into this undertow. I'm
Mm-hmm.
trying to like get myself back up on this, like into this canoe. But like there's like this little divot, like past this 7 foot rock,
Mm-hmm.
and so I can't even get myself onto this huge rock in order to be able to try and get myself up into the canoe. And so, whereas kind of like just where I had fallen out of the canoe, I wasn't able to do it, and that's exactly what Vic and Ian had been able to do. So I
Mm-hmm.
ended up needing to kind of like basically do a pull up and hoist myself up and get myself up. And like, if I were to do that now, like I don't know if I have the body strength to be able to get myself back up into that canoe.
Yeah.
Now, and and for those that are listening at home, Pat and I we swam in high school. Pat swam in college. I had a very brief stint on the Boston College swimming and diving team, that was extremely short lived. But like we are very experienced swimmers, and so I was keeping kind of like the edge of the water in my mind, and I was
Mm-hmm.
like, I can get to the edge if I need to get to the edge, even with this current moving as fast as it is.
Mm-hmm.
But it was terrifying,
Oh, I'm
and of
sure.
it's getting later at this point too. It's like 6 o'clock. So like sun's starting to go down, and I'm like finally am able to get myself up into this canoe. And so now it's kind of like this. We're kind of like catching our breath and trying to figure out what it is that we're gonna do, because now we're all wet. We're
Mm-hmm.
now out of the water. The sun's going down. It's getting colder, and we're getting cold.
Yep.
And so like at this point, we got to kind of like decide what it is that we're gonna do. So we ended up taking the canoe, and we put ourselves in like the next closest outlet. The next closest outlet that we could find, was for the like there's like I think it's a Methodist church, that has like this little ramp that goes down to the river. And so we bring our 3-person canoe, now that we're up and dripping wet, and we bring it over to the side. And so at this point, like I'm following Ian and Vic's instructions, because they have so much more experience on the water than I am, and they're like, Mike, you got to strip down. And I was like, all right, looks like I'm stripping down. Because my clothes were all soaking
Yeah.
wet, and now that it's getting colder and colder and colder, I have a higher chance of catching hypothermia
Hmm.
if I'm wearing these cold wet clothes than if I'm in my boxers. And so that's what I did in the parking lot of this church. Now, of course, I went to the church to see if it was unlocked. Of course, it's not unlocked. And so I'm like, here I am in the parking lot of this church, and now at this point, the sun has gone down. We're
Hmm.
talking like 7:30 or so. By the time we're able to kind of like get ourselves there, my clothes are hanging over the trees, and it's getting colder and later, and so there I am, and while Ian and Vic went down and they paddled as fast as they could to be able to go down and like get the car and everything,
Hmm.
and the plan was for them to come and pick me up in the car, and so I had my phone, but there it's completely out of service. I've got no sort of
Yeah.
like service or anything like that. While they like fired down the Chattahoochee to go and get the car and then pick me up again,
Hmm.
and I'm like, I hope that they know the right church. I hope that they know where it is that they're going, because all I could do was I was just like jogging back and forth in this
Yeah.
parking lot to keep myself warm for Pat. I was there for like 45 minutes to an
Oh
hour,
man.
just going back and forth while they ended up bringing their like getting all the way back down to the car, and then they came and picked me up as I was like shivering, and grabbed my clothes off of the tree, and I got back into the car, and I think Vic had some like blankets and stuff that were in his car that I was like wrapped up with, and anyways, and so there I am in the car and shivering, and then we made our way to the one place that we knew was going to be open, that we could get ourselves some coffee and get ourselves warm again, which was Waffle House. So we
Wow.
made our way to the closest Waffle House, and there I am. I end up like walking into the Waffle House. Ian had taken his own car, and I'm sure that the people that are listening to this at home are not as familiar with the movie I Spy as Pat and I am. But it's a movie that Pat and I have watched like countless times. It's this movie that came out in like the early 2000s. It's Owen Wilson and Eddie Murphy. It's a hysterical movie. I'm sure it gets like a 15 on Rotten Tomatoes. It's not like a critically acclaimed movie, but there's a moment in that movie when there's like this plane, it's called the Switchblade, which is supposed to be able to like go invisible, and the heroes Owen Wilson and Eddie Murphy, after like saving the day, get themselves into this plane, and then they end up crashing into the river, and Eddie Murphy, who's this like boxer celebrity, is super pissed at Owen Wilson for like failing for like screwing up the mission. And that's how I felt, was walking into this Waffle House talking to like the Owen Wilson character in this movie. And Owen Wilson it was like Ian was like Owen Wilson, where in the movie Owen Wilson says like, there was a nozzle failure, the intake manifold, it went all haywire, and he like, basically like the same thing. I walked in and I was like, Ian, so what happened? We weren't supposed to capsize. And he was like, I know, but we capsized like crazy, right? Like, and so there we are with our coffee, kind of like huddling together for warmth in our Waffle House. But it was definitely one of those things where it's like you didn't have control over your surroundings. But honestly, it was kind of a moment where I'm glad that like everything ended up going well, and that we were able to kind of like make our way out of that, because like for those that are listening at home, know your waters before you get into them. If I hadn't been there with Ian and with and with Vic, it could have been a very different ending to the story. So like just like safety wise, and for those listening at home, just make sure that you know your waters is definitely kind of like a learning experience to kind of take away from it.
Thanks for listening to the East Coast Hunt Fish Hike podcast. If you have questions, comments, or have an idea for an episode, feel free to follow us and reach out over social media. Don't forget to rate, review, or tell your friends about the podcast. And until you hear from us again, get outside. Have some fun out there.